I discovered her lies with ice in my veins, a calculated betrayal that would have shattered a lesser man. My name is George McDonnell, and I'm 38 years old. Each morning, I wake before dawn, pull on my work boots, and head to construction sites where honest labor builds honest things. Angeline McDonnell, my estranged wife, vanished during her second trimester 4 years ago, taking half our savings and leaving nothing but silence. When she returned unannounced, she brought Jalen, a 3-year-old boy with skin darker than mine or hers, claiming he was my son. My hands trembled as I gripped the doorframe, watching this stranger use a child as her shield. My accountant, Linda Rafferty, warned me that rage makes you reckless. My neighbor Tom said I should throw them both out. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I was in my workshop behind the house, sanding down oak cabinet doors when I heard tires on gravel. The late afternoon sun slanted through dusty windows, catching wood particles that floated like gold flakes in the air. My hands moved with practiced rhythm, back and forth with the grain, never against it. That's the thing about woodwork. You follow the rules, or you ruin the piece. My phone buzzed, probably Mrs. Keller about her kitchen remodel. I'd check it later. Right now, this cabinet deserved my full attention. The dust tickled my nose as I blew across the surface, revealing the wood's honeyed warmth underneath. The car door slammed outside. Early clients usually called first, but sometimes people drove by when they saw my truck. I wiped my hands on a rag tucked into my belt and headed toward the front of the house. Whoever it was, I'd need to explain I wasn't taking new projects until next month. I stepped onto the porch, squinting against the sun, and there she was, Angeline, standing in my driveway like a ghost made flesh. My lungs forgot how to work. 4 years of silence, of wondering if she was alive or dead, and now she stood 20 feet away, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun, the other holding something. No, someone. A little boy, maybe 3 years old, with copper-brown skin and dark curly hair. My body went cold despite the summer heat. I gripped the porch railing to steady myself. "Hey, George," she said, like she'd just gone out for groceries. Her voice hadn't changed, still that slight lilt that once made my chest warm. Now it made my stomach clench. The boy squirmed in her arms, and she set him down. He stayed close to her leg, fingers twisted in the fabric of her skirt. "What are you doing here?" My voice sounded strange, distant. She smiled, that same practiced smile she'd use when asking for something expensive. "I came home." Home. The word hung between us like a bad joke. She walked toward the porch steps, the boy trailing behind. I didn't move from the doorway. Didn't invite her in. Didn't say anything at all. She paused at the bottom step, looking up at me. "Aren't you going to say hello properly?" 4 years, Angeline." The words scraped my throat. 4 years without a word. She sighed, like I was being difficult over something trivial. "Let's not do this out here. The neighbors—" I don't give a damn about the neighbors. But I stepped aside anyway. Not for her sake, but for the boy's. He was watching me with wide, solemn eyes. She brushed past me, familiar perfume making memories slam into me like physical blows. The boy followed, giving me a wide berth. I closed the door and turned to find her in the kitchen, my kitchen, pulling out a chair at the table for the child, my hands clenched into fists. "This is Jalen," she said, smoothing his hair. Then she looked up at me. "He's yours." The room tilted. I stared at the boy, at his warm brown skin so unlike mine or Angeline's, at his tightly curled hair, at features that shared nothing with my reflection. "Mine," I repeated. Not a question, a challenge. "Yes." Her chin lifted. "You need to be a father to him now." The absurdity nearly made me laugh. You vanish for 4 years and come back with someone else's child, and I'm supposed to just nod and play along? "I told you, he's yours." Her voice hardened. "Genetics don't change what we had." "What we had," I said, hearing my voice drop dangerously low, "was a marriage you walked out on. You were 5 months pregnant when you disappeared." I was scared. She folded her arms. "You're so rigid, George. You needed to control everything, even me." "Control?" I barked a laugh. "You call paying bills and planning a nursery control?" The boy, Jalen, flinched at my tone. I forced myself to breathe deeply, to lower my voice. Why did you leave? Where have you been? Why now? The questions tumbled out. I needed time to figure things out. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Something in me cracked. 4 years of questions, of self-doubt, of wondering what I'd done wrong, all of it crystallizing into white-hot clarity. You vanished, went silent, and got pregnant, I whispered, leaning toward her. I've been worried about you. And this is what I find? She glared back, jaw set, eyes defiant. But I saw it. That flicker of something in her expression. Not shame, not remorse, calculation. I watched Jalen's wide eyes dart between us as the silence stretched thin. He was just a kid, caught in the middle of something ugly. Something that wasn't his fault. He's yours, Angeline repeated, her voice gaining that edge it always got when she was lying. I knew that tone. 4 years hadn't erased the memory. Stop saying that. My voice dropped lower, steadier. We both know he's not. The golden evening light slanted through the kitchen window, catching dust motes that danced between us. Same kitchen, same woman, but nothing else was the same. You don't know anything, she snapped, crossing her arms. I was pregnant when I left. And you think I can't count? I stepped closer, feeling a tremor build in my hands. Look at him, Angeline. Really look at him. He's what, 3 years old? Mixed race? You were carrying my child when you left. Our child? Where is my child? The question ripped out of me, raw and ragged. My fists clenched so hard my nails bit into my palms. What happened to our baby? She looked away, her throat working. There were complications. Complications, I echoed. And you couldn't pick up a phone? Send a message? Let me know our child was gone? I was in a bad place? So was I. I slammed my hand against the countertop, making the glasses rattle. Jalen jumped, his little face crumpling. I was right here, Angeline, thinking you might be dead in a ditch somewhere. I filed missing persons reports. I called hospitals. I drove to your mother's place in Cincinnati and sat on her porch for 2 days. You always had to be in charge, she shot back, eyes flashing. Everything had to be your way. The house, the nursery colors, the budget. You call paying bills and planning a nursery control? My voice cracked once, then steadied. You walked out, went silent, and got pregnant. I've been worried about you. And this is what I find? The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, just a flash, I saw something like shame cross her face. Then Jalen started to cry, soft, hiccuping sobs that broke through the tension. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to gentle. Hey, buddy, it's okay. I crouched down to his level. Why don't you go sit on the porch for a minute? The swing still works. He looked up at Angeline, who nodded stiffly. He scurried out the door, and I waited until I heard the creak of the porch swing before turning back to her. Why are you really here? I asked, the anger cooling to something harder, more focused. She hesitated, her fingers playing with the pendant at her throat, a nervous habit I remembered well. Things didn't work out like I thought they would. And I need somewhere to stay, just until I get back on my feet. I let out a slow breath. So he left you too. Her eyes flashed. That's not... Save it. I held up a hand. I don't need the details. But if you think you can just walk back in here and pick up where you left off, you're wrong. This is still my house too, she said, chin lifting. My name's on the deed. Then you can explain to a judge why you abandoned it for 4 years. I stared her down. You want to stay? Fine. The guest room's where it always was. But understand this. I'm calling my lawyer first thing tomorrow. George, I'm not done, I cut in. You walked out on me, on our life, on our child. Now you come back with someone else's kid expecting what? That I'll just roll over because you've run out of options? She swallowed hard. The law is still on my side. We'll see about that. I walked to the front door and held it open. Get your stuff if you're staying. But this isn't a reconciliation, Angeline. This is just me being decent enough not to throw you and a child out at sunset. She gathered her purse, hesitating at the door. I'll get our bags from the car. I nodded stiffly, watching as she crossed to her car, not the one she'd left in. New car, new child, new life she'd made without me. As the door closed behind her, I stared at the half-empty water glass she'd left on the counter. Tomorrow, I muttered. I start the fight. I woke before dawn, though woke implies I'd actually slept. The guest bedroom door had remained shut all night, and I'd spent most of those hours staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The shock on her face when I didn't just roll over. The calculated way she'd played the abandoned mother card. the boy caught in the middle of her schemes. First light broke through the kitchen window as I made coffee, strong, black, bitter, like the taste in my mouth. I took it out to the porch, settling into the old Adirondack chair my dad had built. The morning air felt clean compared to the suffocating tension inside. When the clock hit 7, I pulled out my phone. My attorney, Dale Whitman, kept early hours, one of the reasons I'd hired him for business contracts over the years. His secretary answered on the second ring. Whitman and Associates. Morning, Cheryl. It's George McDonald. I need to speak with Dale as soon as possible. I swallowed hard, the words still feeling strange. It's a personal matter. He has an opening at 9. Will that work? I'll be there. I hung up, watching the steam rise from my mug. The quiet neighborhood was waking up. Mr. Larson walking his retriever, mail carrier already making early rounds. Normal life continuing while mine had just exploded. Remember when you'd stub your toe as a kid and there'd be that moment before the pain actually hit? That's where I was, numb shock giving way to the throbbing reality. Dale's office smelled like leather and paper. He listened without interrupting as I laid it out. Angeline's disappearance, the 4 years of silence, her sudden return with another man's child. His expression remained neutral, but his pen pressed harder into his notepad with each detail. So, what do? I finally asked. He set down his pen. First, we file for divorce immediately. Ohio's abandonment laws are on your side, given the timeline and lack of contact. And the house? My business? That's the second step. We file for an emergency hearing to establish separate property. Your contracting business was founded before the marriage, correct? I nodded. 8 years before. Good. And the house? Bought it 6 months after we married. Both names on the deed. Dale made another note. We'll need documented proof of abandonment. Bank records showing she withdrew funds before leaving. Phone records showing no contact. Any missing persons reports you filed. I reached into my jacket, pulling out a manila folder. Already gathered most of it. I keep everything. A hint of smile crossed his face. That's why you're my easiest client. He flipped through the papers. This helps. We also need to establish a clear timeline of her departure and the lack of financial contribution since. Linda has all those records, my accountant. Get them to me by tomorrow. Dale leaned forward. George, I need to ask, is there any possibility the child is yours? The question hit like a sucker punch, though I'd been expecting it. None. You can see that just looking at him. We may need to establish that legally. Whatever it takes. By the time I left Dale's office, my phone showed a text message from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. This is Angeline. Got a new phone. Just so you know, I'll be seeing you in court for child support and my share. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I laughed, a harsh sound even to my own ears. The audacity was almost impressive. 4 years of silence, and now she expected money on demand. I typed back, let your lawyer talk to mine, then blocked the number. By noon, I was pulling into Linda Rafferty's driveway. She'd been my accountant since I'd started the business, had watched me build it from a one-man operation to a team of 8. Her house doubled as her office, a craftsman bungalow with impeccable books inside. You look like hell, she said by way of greeting, ushering me into her home office. Feel worse. I spread the bank statements across her desk, the joint account Angeline had emptied before leaving, the business accounts she'd never had access to. Linda's eyes narrowed as she scanned the numbers. She took $12,000 when she left? Emergency fund, plus that month's mortgage payment. And not a peep for 4 years. Linda shook her head, already pulling up spreadsheets. Let me separate everything. What's clearly business, what's personal, what might be contested. I watched her work, organizing my financial life into defensive positions. She's got nothing, Linda finally said. The abandonment is clear-cut, but what? She's desperate, George. Desperate people get creative. I nodded, thinking of Jalen. Using a child as leverage. That was beyond creative. That was ruthless. As darkness fell, I thanked Linda and headed home. I'd half expected to find Angeline's things moved back in, but the house was exactly as I'd left it. No sign she'd returned for her bags. I double-checked the locks before closing up for the night, a new habit forming already. As I pulled the curtain closed in the living room, a glint of reflected light caught my eye. Down the street, engine idling, sat Angeline's car, watching, waiting, planning her next move. 2 days later, I pushed through the glass doors of Dale's office building, a thick folder tucked under my arm. The weight of the documents matched the heaviness in my chest. Each step across the marble lobby felt like trudging through concrete. Dale was waiting in the conference room, coffee already poured and legal pads arranged. His secretary had called that morning with the news. Angeline's attorney had filed their opening salvo, claims of emotional abandonment and psychological distress. According to her story, I'd driven her away with controlling behavior and emotional unavailability during her pregnancy. "They're painting quite the picture," Dale said, gesturing for me to sit. "According to their filing, you were so cold and domineering that she fled for her mental health." I dropped my folder on the table. "That's one hell of a rewrite of history." "It's strategy," Dale replied, opening the file. "They're establishing a narrative early, one where she's the victim. Standard practice when the facts aren't on your side." I leaned forward, opening my own folder. "I brought everything you asked for. Bank statements showing her withdrawals the day she left. Phone records proving she never called. Not once. The report I filed with the sheriff when she disappeared." Dale nodded, scanning the documents. "These are exactly what we need. She withdrew $12,000 the morning before she vanished. Plus another $2,000 from the ATM that night. The bank's security camera caught her at 10:47 p.m. I was working late, finishing a project. And the house payments?" I handed him another sheet. "I kept making them alone, every month, never missed one." Dale's expression shifted slightly, the closest thing to a smile I'd seen since this started. "George, do you realize how unusual it is for a client to keep such meticulous records? Most people who walk through that door can barely remember what happened last month." The smell of sawdust always lingered on my clothes. When I was 14, my father had sat me down in his workshop and said, "In construction, measure twice, cut once. In life, document everything, regret nothing." The memory of his voice, gruff but steady, felt like a hand on my shoulder. "I've always tracked everything," I said. "Business habit. It's about to pay off." Dale organized the papers, making notes. "They've requested mediation next week. It's non-binding, but it gives us a chance to see their full strategy. And hear more lies. Yes, be prepared for that." Dale looked up from his notes. "People are talking, George. Small towns have big ears." I'd already noticed. That morning at the hardware store, conversation had died when I walked in. The cashier couldn't quite meet my eyes. Someone had mentioned that poor pregnant woman just loud enough for me to hear. "Let them talk," I said, though the words tasted bitter. "People who know me know better. Still, it might get worse before it gets better." Dale closed his folder. "Angeline's playing for sympathy. Public opinion matters to her case." I nodded, throat tight. "I'm not playing her game. Just getting through this." The community center conference room felt too small for the storm brewing inside it. Angeline sat across the table, wearing a pale blue blouse that made her look younger, more vulnerable. Her attorney, a silver-haired man with expensive cufflinks, placed a protective hand on her shoulder as we entered. The mediator, a retired judge named Harriet Collier, laid out the ground rules. "This is an opportunity to find common ground before proceeding to court. Everything said here remains confidential." Angeline spoke first, voice soft and trembling. Her eyes stayed fixed on the table. "I was scared," she began. "George was distant, cold. The pregnancy made everything worse. He worked all the time, barely acknowledged me or the baby." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I needed space to think. I never meant to stay away so long, but I was afraid to come back." The mediator nodded sympathetically. "Mr. McDonald, would you like to respond?" I felt Dale's warning tap on my knee. Stay calm, stick to facts. "Yes, I would." I kept my voice level. "Angeline withdrew $14,000 from our accounts the day she left. She packed 3 suitcases. She left no note, no message, nothing indicating she planned to return." I placed the bank statements on the table. "These aren't the actions of someone needing space. These are the actions of someone leaving permanently." Angeline's eyes flashed. "I took money I was entitled to. You took half our emergency fund and that month's mortgage payment." I slid another document forward. "And here's the police report I filed when you disappeared." "I was worried you might be hurt or in danger." Her attorney interjected. "My client was in emotional distress." "Your client," I cut in, "never once called to say she was safe. Not once in 4 years. She didn't call when our baby was supposedly born. She didn't send a birth announcement. She didn't request child support. Nothing. Angeline's lips trembled. You were always so cold, so judgmental. Just like you're being now. I'm being factual, I replied. You left. You took my money. You made this bed. The room fell silent. The mediator glanced between us, pen tapping against her notepad. Perhaps, she suggested carefully, we should discuss the child's— He's using that tone again, Angeline interrupted, voice rising. This is exactly how he always was. Cold, cruel. She stood abruptly. I can't do this today. He's being heartless, just like always. The mediator sighed. Let's adjourn for now. We can reconvene when emotions are less raw. As Angeline swept out with her attorney, I leaned toward Dale. Let her act, I muttered, gathering my papers. It's all she has left. I was halfway through my morning coffee when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but these days, I answered everything. Mr. McDonald, this is Tamara from First Ohio Bank. There's an urgent matter with your business accounts that requires your immediate attention. Something in her tone sent ice down my spine. What kind of matter? I'm not authorized to discuss it over the phone. If you could come to the branch as soon as possible. 20 minutes later, I stood at the manager's desk while he slid a legal document across to me. I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald. It's a temporary restraining order. We're required to freeze all accounts associated with McDonald Contracting until further notice. My fingers went numb around the paper. On what grounds? The order cites potential dissipation of marital assets. The manager, I'd known him 5 years, couldn't quite meet my eyes. It was filed yesterday afternoon by Stevenson and Associates on behalf of Angeline McDonald. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I had payroll tomorrow. Materials to order. Subcontractors waiting on payments. These are business accounts, I said, keeping my voice steady though my pulse hammered in my ears. Not personal funds. The order doesn't make that distinction, sir. Until a judge rules otherwise, we're legally bound to comply. I stared at the paper, the words swimming together. One phrase jumped out. To prevent the hiding or transfer of joint marital assets pending divorce proceedings. She knew exactly what she was doing. Every contractor lives and dies by cash flow. Walking out to my truck, I gripped my keys so hard they left marks in my palm. 18 guys depended on those paychecks. 3 job sites needed materials. The rage built up behind my eyes like pressure in a steam pipe. I closed my eyes, counted to 10. Then I called Linda Rafferty. I need help, now. Linda met me at her office 20 minutes later, already pulling files before I finished explaining. She's playing dirty, Linda said, pushing her reading glasses up. But we've got something she doesn't. What's that? Records, years of them. She gestured to the filing cabinet behind her desk. Every business transaction, separate from your personal finances, documented and filed quarterly with the IRS. My phone buzzed. A text from Miguel, my foreman. Bank says payment bounced. Guys asking what's up. My crew's payroll just failed, I said, feeling sick. 18 families waiting on those checks. Linda's eyes narrowed. We're going to fix this. First, call Dale. We need an emergency hearing to lift this freeze, at least on the business accounts. While Linda pulled ledgers, I explained the situation to Dale. His voice tightened. She's trying to force you to settle. Pressure tactic. I'll file an emergency motion this afternoon. Next came the hardest call, to Miguel. Tell the guys what's happening. It's temporary. If anyone's in a bind for rent or bills, I'll figure something out. Linda laid out spreadsheets across her conference table. We need to separate every business dollar from your marital finances. Show the court these funds were earned through contracts, not marital assets. We worked through lunch, then dinner. The sky darkened outside Linda's windows as we cross-referenced bank statements against contracts, invoices against deposits. My back ached. My eyes burned. Linda brought coffee, then switched us to water when my hands started to shake. George, you need sleep, she said around midnight. I shook my head. Not until we've got every receipt in order. Not until I know my guys can get paid. This isn't your fault. Doesn't matter. It's my responsibility. I rubbed my face. She thinks she can break me by going after my business. She's wrong. Dale called at 7 the next morning. The emergency hearing was set for noon. I changed into my court clothes in Linda's bathroom and drove straight to the courthouse with 3 boxes of documentation. Outside the courtroom, my phone buzzed constantly. Clients worried about project delays. Suppliers concerned about payment. Each message tightened the knot in my stomach. I stood on the courthouse steps, watching people come and go, normal people with normal problems. My phone buzzed again, the fifth call from my lumber supplier. I silenced it and stared up at the county seal above the door. She wants me broke, I whispered to myself, the words tasting like copper pennies. I'll give her something else. Defeat. 3 days later, I was still fighting sleep. The emergency hearing had gone well. Dale had presented our documentation methodically while Angeline's attorney stammered through weak counterarguments, but the judge needed time to review the evidence before ruling. Meanwhile, I was at the Fisher site until sunset, installing trim myself because I couldn't afford to hire back the guys I'd had to temporarily lay off. My fingers were cramping around the nail gun when headlights swept across the living room windows. Linda's sedan pulled up, and I set my tools down. She stepped inside, ducking under the plastic sheeting, a manila folder clutched to her chest. Her expression told me everything. "We won?" I asked, not daring to hope. Linda nodded, a tight smile breaking through her professional composure. "Judge Whitfield just signed the order. Your business accounts are released from the freeze, effective immediately." The relief hit me like a physical wave. I closed my eyes for a second, shoulders sagging. Thank God. "The personal accounts remain frozen until the divorce proceedings advance," Linda cautioned, handing me the papers. "But your company funds and payroll accounts are clear." I flipped through the order, stopping at Judge Whitfield's signature. "First thing tomorrow, I'm calling everyone back to work." "This is just round one, George," Linda said gently. "She's going to keep coming." "I know," I folded the papers carefully. "But at least my guys can feed their families now." Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table calling every employee, promising back pay and apologizing for the disruption. Most were understanding. A couple weren't. I couldn't blame them. The pre-trial conference was scheduled for the following afternoon. Dale and I arrived early, reviewing our position on temporary support, none, and division of assets, also none, given the documented abandonment. Angeline and her attorney were late, a power move that fell flat when Judge Whitfield's clerk frowned at them. Angeline wore a cream-colored blouse that made her look paler than usual, her chestnut hair pulled back in a severe bun. She barely glanced my way during the proceedings. It was a short meeting. Dates were set, financial disclosure requirements were outlined, preliminary positions were noted. Nothing was decided, but battle lines were clearly drawn. As we exited the courtroom, Angeline lingered in the hallway, dismissing her attorney with a whispered word. I knew what she was doing, setting up a chance encounter. Dale raised his eyebrows in warning, but I nodded for him to go ahead. Some things needed saying. We met at the parking lot, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the asphalt. "You didn't have to humiliate me in there," she said, her voice quiet but sharp. "By presenting facts? That's not humiliation, Angeline. That's reality." She adjusted her purse strap, fingers tightening. "The accounts didn't have to be frozen if you'd been reasonable from the beginning." Reasonable? The word tasted bitter. "You disappear for 4 years, come back with someone else's child, demand half my business, and call that reasonable? You'll regret making me your enemy," she said, eyes narrowing. "I know things about you." I almost laughed. "You already were my enemy when you left." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, as if the thought had never occurred to her. "You don't know what I went through," she whispered. "No," I agreed, suddenly tired of the whole thing. "And you never gave me the chance to find out." I turned and walked away, her silence heavier than any retort. The rain started as I drove home, fat drops smacking against the windshield. It matched my mood, cold, relentless, washing away pretense. I passed the old movie theater where we used to go on Friday nights before everything fell apart. For a second, I could almost smell the popcorn, feel her hand in mine as we found our seats. Strange how memories ambush you when you least expect them. Inside the house, I built a fire in the fireplace, more for comfort than warmth. Then I did something I'd been avoiding for 4 years. I pulled down the box of photos from the hall closet and sat cross-legged on the hearth. Our wedding day, hiking trips, that ridiculous Halloween when we dressed as salt and pepper shakers. I studied her face in each one, trying to reconcile the smiling woman in the pictures with the cold stranger in the parking lot. One by one, I fed them to the flames, not in anger, in release. As the last picture curled to ash, us on the porch swing, her head on my shoulder, my phone chimed with an email, legal notice. I opened it, skimmed the contents, and felt my jaw tighten. Angeline had filed a motion requesting temporary spousal support of $3,000 monthly, retroactive to the date of her return. The war had only escalated. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, straightening the collar of my work jacket. The familiar weight of it across my shoulders felt right, honest. The embroidered McDonald contracting patch over my heart said more about who I was than any suit could. Dale had suggested I dress more formally for court. Appearances matter, he'd said. But I wasn't playing dress up for anyone. The judge would see me as I was, a working man fighting for what was his. I checked my watch. 7:30. Court started at 9, and I wanted to be early. The morning air had that particular Ohio crispness that makes your lungs feel cleaner. Frost sparkled on the lawn as I walked to my truck. I'd barely slept, rehearsing answers to questions that might come my way, remembering dates and details that mattered now more than ever. The courthouse parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived. I sat in my truck for a while, watching the sun climb higher, feeling oddly calm. Whatever happened today, I'd done everything possible to protect what I'd built. Dale met me on the courthouse steps at 8:30, briefcase in hand, expression confident. "Ready?" he asked. "Been ready for 4 years," I replied. The courtroom smelled like furniture polish and tension. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table, conscious of every creak of the wooden chair. When the back doors opened at 5 minutes to 9, I didn't need to turn around to know it was Angeline. The scent of her perfume, roses, and something sharper drifted forward. When I finally looked, something cold settled in my chest. She was dressed in white from head to toe, a fitted dress that somehow made her look both professional and vulnerable. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, the picture of injured innocence. I'd almost forgotten how good she was at this. Almost. Our eyes met briefly before she took her seat. No recognition flickered there, just calculation. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Whitfield entered. She was a tall woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her black robes crisp and authoritative. Her gaze swept the courtroom without lingering on anyone in particular. "Be seated," she said, her voice brisk. "McDonald versus McDonald. Petition for divorce and division of assets. Counsel, your opening statements." Angeline's lawyer stood first, a man named Peterson with expensive cufflinks and practiced sympathy in his voice. "Your Honor, my client seeks only fairness after enduring a difficult marriage to a controlling husband. Mrs. McDonald left temporarily to sort through emotional distress, always intending to reconcile. Now Mr. McDonald refuses her rightful access to marital assets and denies his responsibilities to both wife and child." I felt my blood pressure rising but kept my face neutral. Dale had warned me, "Don't react. Don't give them anything to use." When it was Dale's turn, he stood unhurriedly, straightening his glasses. "Your Honor, this case isn't about emotion. It's about documented facts. Mrs. McDonald abandoned the marriage 4 years ago, taking substantial funds and severing all contact. Mr. McDonald has built his business through his own labor before, during, and after her departure. We have extensive documentation of Mrs. McDonald's actions that clearly establish abandonment under Ohio law." Judge Whitfield nodded. "Proceed with evidence." What followed was the systematic dismantling of Angeline's story. Dale produced bank records showing her withdrawals the day she left, phone records proving she never once attempted contact, statements from neighbors confirming she had packed her things while I was at work. With each document read aloud, I watched Angeline's posture stiffen slightly. Peterson kept leaning over to whisper to her, but her responses were increasingly short. The most damaging evidence came last, a lease agreement for an apartment 60 miles away, signed by Angeline and a man named Michael Reeves just 6 months after she'd vanished. The dates matched perfectly with the timeline we'd constructed. Judge Whitfield removed her glasses and looked directly at Angeline. "Mrs. McDonald, can you explain why you entered a residential agreement with another individual while still legally married?" Angeline's composure wavered for the first time. I needed somewhere safe to stay. With Mr. Reeves specifically? He was a friend who helped me during a difficult time. A friend whose name appears with yours on utility bills for over 3 years? Judge Whitfield's tone remained neutral, but her eyes were sharp. Angeline's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, my client's personal relationships during separation aren't relevant to the division of assets." "I disagree, Counselor. Intent to abandon the marriage is directly relevant under Ohio law, and establishment of another permanent residence suggests such intent." Judge Whitfield made a few notes, then looked up at the clock. I'll review the evidence overnight and deliver my ruling tomorrow morning at 9. Court is adjourned. As people began to file out, I gathered my papers slowly, deliberately. I knew Angeline would try to corner me. It was her pattern. Play one role in public, another in private. Sure enough, she intercepted me in the hallway outside, her white dress making her look like some avenging angel. "You think you've won?" she hissed, voice low enough that only I could hear. I met her gaze steadily. "I think you finally lost." The sky darkened as I walked toward the courthouse the next morning. Gunmetal clouds rolled in from the west, promising rain. Seemed fitting somehow, like the heavens knew what was coming. I'd barely slept. 4 years of questions, 8 months of legal battles, and now everything would be decided in minutes. My throat felt dry as I climbed the stone steps. The courtroom was quieter than yesterday. Dale nodded at me as I slid into my seat beside him. Across the aisle, Angeline sat perfectly straight in another white outfit, different from yesterday, but with the same calculated innocence. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear. She didn't react. "You good?" Dale asked under his breath. "Just want it over," I replied. "Whatever happens, remember, I know. No reactions." The bailiff's voice cut through our whispered conversation. "All rise." Judge Whitfield entered, her face revealing nothing as she took her place. The room settled into silence, heavy with anticipation. "In the matter of McDonnell versus McDonnell," she began, placing her glasses on her nose, "I have reviewed all evidence submitted by both parties. This court makes the following findings of fact." My heartbeat drummed in my ears as she methodically laid out the timeline. Our marriage, Angeline's pregnancy, her departure, the money she took, the complete cessation of communication, and her subsequent living arrangements with Michael Reeves. Under Ohio law, Mrs. McDonnell's actions constitute willful abandonment of the marital home and relationship. Judge Whitfield's voice remained steady, clinical. The court finds no evidence of Mr. McDonnell forcing her departure or preventing her return. Rather, documentation shows Mrs. McDonnell established a separate residence of her own volition. I caught a flicker of movement from the corner of my eye, Angeline shifting in her seat, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. Regarding division of assets, Judge Whitfield continued, the court rules that Mr. McDonnell's contracting business, established prior to marriage and maintained solely by him during and after separation, remains his separate property. Dale's hand found my shoulder, squeezing once. I kept my face neutral. The marital home, while acquired during marriage, was maintained exclusively by Mr. McDonnell for 4 years following Mrs. McDonnell's departure. Mrs. McDonnell made no contributions to mortgage payments or upkeep during this period. Judge Whitfield paused, turning a page in her notes. Therefore, this court finds that Mrs. McDonnell has forfeited equitable rights to the marital home through her abandonment and subsequent conduct. The petition for spousal support is denied. Divorce is granted on grounds of abandonment. The gavel struck with finality. The sound rippled through me like thunder. It was over. 4 years of wondering why she left. 8 months of fighting to protect what was mine. And now, in one moment, it was finished. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Angeline's attorney leaned toward her, saying something urgent I couldn't hear. Her face had gone pale, composure finally cracking as reality set in. "Your Honor," she said suddenly, her voice thin, "I just wanted security. That's all this was ever about." Judge Whitfield, who had been gathering her papers, paused and looked directly at Angeline. The courtroom went silent again. "Mrs. McDonnell," she said evenly, "security doesn't come from lies. It comes from honesty and mutual respect, neither of which you demonstrated in this marriage or these proceedings. This court is adjourned." With another strike of the gavel, Judge Whitfield stood and exited. The finality of it all washed over me in waves. Dale turned to me, offering a handshake that turned into a brief, firm embrace. "It's done, George. You can breathe now." The room began to empty. I gathered my papers slowly, not wanting to rush, not wanting to seem eager or triumphant. This wasn't a victory to celebrate. It was just the end of something that should never have happened. Outside, rain had started to fall, soft and steady. I descended the courthouse steps, Dale beside me discussing final paperwork. Halfway down, I heard Angeline's voice behind us. "George!" I turned. She stood at the top of the steps, the white of her dress stark against the gray sky, her face contorted with anger, and something else. Fear, maybe. "Everyone knows what you did to me," she called, loud enough for the scattered courthouse visitors to hear, her last attempt at public shaming. I looked at her for a long moment, rain beating on my jacket. 4 years ago, her words would have cut me to the bone. Now they barely touched me. "No, Angeline," I replied, my voice calm and clear enough to carry. "Everyone just learned who you are." 3 weeks after the verdict, sawdust floated in the afternoon sunlight streaming through my workshop windows. I ran my palm across the oak cabinet door I'd just finished sanding, smooth as glass. There was something soothing about the rhythm of it all. Measure twice, cut once, sand until perfect. Problems that could be solved with patience and precision. My phone buzzed on the workbench. Another new client referral. Business had picked up steadily since the divorce finalized. Word travels fast in small towns, and the truth had finally outpaced the rumors. Folks who'd avoided eye contact at the hardware store now stopped to chat, asked for quotes, mentioned projects they'd been putting off. I set down my sandpaper and checked my watch. Linda Rafferty would be stopping by soon with the last batch of paperwork. After 8 months of legal battles, financial audits, and court appearances, everything was finally wrapping up. The business was secure. The house was mine. The divorce was official. I heard tires on gravel and glanced out to see Linda's sensible sedan pulling into the driveway. She stepped out, carrying a manila envelope, her reading glasses perched on her head like always. "Right on time," I called, wiping my hands on a shop rag as I walked outside. Linda smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "Wouldn't dream of being late for this delivery." She handed me the envelope. "Last of it. Everything's filed, recorded, and official. You are, as they say, a free man." I took the envelope, feeling its weight. "Thanks, Linda. Not just for this, for everything. You didn't have to put in all those extra hours." She waved away my gratitude. "After 20 years doing your books, you're practically family." She paused, studying my face. "How are you holding up?" "Really?" I considered the question, leaning against the workshop doorframe. "Better than I expected. Busy with work, sleeping through most nights now." "That's something," she nodded. "You know, George, not many men would have handled this with the dignity you did." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just did what needed doing." Linda touched my arm briefly. "Well, I won't keep you. Just wanted to deliver this in person." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, almost forgot. Marge at the bank said Angeline tried to cash a bad check last week. Apparently she's renting that little apartment above the laundromat on Sycamore. How's she getting by?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Temp work mostly. That fellow she was with, Michael, he's long gone. Left her high and dry from what I hear." Linda watched my reaction carefully. "Not that you need to concern yourself with any of that." "No," I agreed. "I don't." After Linda left, I finished the cabinet set and locked up the shop. The evening was warm, the kind of late summer night that feels suspended between seasons. I sat on my porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. From here, I could see the road where Angeline had driven away 4 years ago. The same road where she'd returned with Jalen, trying to upend my life with lies. The boy was innocent in all this. That much I knew for certain. Whatever happened to him now would shape who he became. I hoped he'd grow up learning different lessons than his mother tried to teach. Strange how I felt no satisfaction in hearing about Angeline's struggles. No vindication, no pleasure. Just a quiet recognition that consequences follow choices, as reliable as seasons changing. Her life was her own now, separate from mine, exactly as she'd once wanted. The sky darkened to deep blue, stars appearing one by one. I thought about the man I was before all this, trusting, maybe too eager to please. I'd rebuilt myself from those broken pieces into someone stronger, someone who knew his worth. I looked out toward the darkening road, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting from my shoulders. "You don't have to scream to burn someone down," I said quietly to myself. "Sometimes all it takes is standing tall in the ruins they made and saying, 'Not mine, not anymore.'" I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.